Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the headlines across the continent this evening. Just days after a US ambassador accused South Africa of supplying arms to Russia, it was revealed that the chief of the South African army is in Moscow for bilateral talks. We'll break it all down with our correspondent in South Africa, Nadine Theron. It's been a month since the conflict in Sudan broke out. The fighting between forces loyal to two sparring generals has killed hundreds of people and displaced almost 1 million. We'll take a look at where things stand 1 month on. Thousands of people have also been displaced by flooding in Somalia. At least 22 people have died in the disaster after the Shabelle River burst its banks in the centre of the country. It's good to have you with us this evening. Our top story, South Africa's relationship with Russia is once again in the spotlight this Monday after Russia's defense ministry announced Pretoria's army chief was in Moscow to discuss military cooperation. Well, it comes just days after the US ambassador to South Africa accused the country of supplying armaments to the Kremlin through a shipment in December, an allegation that President Cyril Ramaphosa denied on Monday, adding that South Africa wasn't siding with Russia in the war in Ukraine. Well, for more details on this, let's cross live to Cape Town in South Africa. France 24's Nadine Theron is standing by for us. Nadine, South Africa said it would investigate this claim of weapons being supplied to Moscow, and now, just days later, the country's army chief is in Moscow.
Yes, indeed. The Army Chief, the South African National Defence Force, has confirmed that Lawrence Mbata is in Russia for bilateral talks. They're acting like it's very regular. The event was planned well in advance, and the Defence Force says it's to discuss issues relating to military cooperation and interaction, and that the two countries have had a long-standing agreement. But what is more interesting is that the opposition party's defense representative today, Cobus Maree, he revealed that the Russian vessel that docked in Simonstown in December actually offloaded ammunition that South Africa bought in 2019 and 2020. These are his allegations. He is a member of the opposition party, but we have seen the reports reflecting the transactions that South Africa bought around 21 million rands worth of ammunition from Russia 3 years ago. And he says the Lady R actually offloaded this ammunition when it docked in December. But he also says that the American ambassador was correct in the claims that South Africa is also supplying arms to Russia. He says he has it under good authority that not only were ammunition offloaded from the boat, but arms or ammunition was also loaded onto the Russian boats to be transported back to Russia. And there are many reasons why the boat's secret overnight mission is suspicious and probably very irregular. Its radar was switched off, and it didn't go through the port of Cape Town, which is South Africa's main port for imports and exports. And the boat basically circumvented customs, police, revenue services, and home affairs. And this Cobus Maree, opposition party member and parliamentary member, flagged the Russian boat's mission on day one. He actually wrote to the defense minister, Tsandi Modise, to ask what the boat was doing there, and she never gave him an answer. In the meantime, we can say that the defense minister's visit to Russia is not surprising because the Minister of International Affairs, Naledi Pandor, also hosted her Russian counterparts about a month ago to strengthen trade relations and ties between the two countries. And she actually said that very constructive talks about the upcoming BRICS conference. And now this is a conference that we expect Russian President Vladimir Putin to attend. And South Africa has still not said anything about arresting Putin. In fact, when some opposition party members said they would like to arrest Putin if he arrives in the Western Cape, the minister in the presidency said that if they want to arrest Putin, they will have to go around the presidential protection unit. So Putin is still expected, and no signs of him being arrested by South Africa, according to the ICC's arrest warrant. Now, in the meantime, President Cyril Ramaphosa wrote in his weekly newsletter to his citizens that South Africa remains neutral and has a stance of non-alignment in the war between Ukraine and Russia. But the opposition party and some other opposition parties are saying that this is not true. And they, the visit by the minister, the Russian boat, there was also a Russian plane that landed at the military base in Pretoria. All of these things are signs that the ANC-led government are not impartial, but actually support Russia in this war.
Nadine, massive developments coming there out of South Africa. Thank you so much for that reporting today. Great job, Nadine Theron, for us there live in Cape Town, South Africa. Well, 1 month into the bloody war in Sudan, there remains no end in sight. Whilst both sides have attended Saudi-mediated truce talks, the fighting on the ground has continued. People across the country have been caught in the middle of a power struggle between the country's two top generals. Well over 600 people have been killed by the conflict, 200,000 have fled the country, and a further 700,000 have been internally displaced. 1 month in, France 24's Bastien Renew takes a look at where things stand.
Less than a week after the signature of a commitment to respect humanitarian principles, it's clear that both the army and the rapid support forces are still targeting civilians. In the city of El Jenina, located a few kilometers from the border with Chad in West Darfur, more than 280 civilians were killed during the weekend, according to local doctors. The rapid support forces are still surrounding the city and targeting civilians. In the city of Omdurman, it's Khartoum twin city, located on the other bank of the Nile, the Coptic community was targeted this weekend by the rapid support forces. Several members of the church were injured. And in Khartoum this Monday, the army bombed an hospital. It seems that several members of the rapid support forces were stationed nearby. So as the war continues, the situation is getting worse for civilians. More than 900,000 have already escaped from their homes, and more than 200,000 are already refugees in neighboring countries. And as the war continues, General Burhan, the head of the army and of the military junta in power since the military coup of October 2021, is trying to show that he's still in power. He issued several decrees this weekend. Among them, one of these decrees freezes the rapid support forces banks' accounts, and another one retires 4 officers from the army that are linked to the rapid support forces. Among them, Brigadier General Omar Hamdan Ahmed. He's a relative of General Hemeti, the head of the rapid support forces, and he's currently leading the RSF team negotiating in Jeddah with the army. About these negotiations, it's still very difficult to know what's happening on the ground since both parties do not want to communicate. But it seems that at the moment they're trying to negotiate how to evacuate from hospitals that are currently occupied. And it's getting more and more urgent as the war continues. More than 70% of hospitals in Khartoum have been destroyed or are currently occupied by armed forces. And thousands of civilians have already been injured. They need to reach medical facilities, but it's very difficult at the moment since many are still occupied by the armed forces.
At least 22 people have been killed by flooding in Somalia. The UN's humanitarian agency has said almost 500,000 people have been affected, with over 200,000 displaced. Olivia Bizot has the details.
Entire neighbourhoods in central Somalia submerged by floodwater. Days of torrential rain forced the Shabelle River to burst its banks, leaving a trail of death and destruction in its wake.
About 200,000 people have now been displaced because of the Shabelle River flash floods in the town of Beledweyne, and that number is likely to increase.
Farton was forced to leave her home in the middle of the night with her 8 children. They walked for hours to get here, a place that is all too familiar.
Whenever the river overflows, we flee. It is the 5th time now that we've had to flee and come here as internally displaced persons.
The floods are not the only challenge facing Somalia. The disaster comes on the heels of record drought that has left millions of people on the brink of famine. The country has also been at war for the past 3 decades. A long fight against a formidable Islamist insurgency.
In the past 2 years, Somalia was hit by a very difficult drought, and that has been very much making the media headlines. But what we're seeing today, and sometimes that very often is left on the sidelines, and we keep forgetting that Somalia is one of the most protracted conflicts in the region, and that there are the majority of the displaced people today, they are fleeing violence.
The fighting has forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes this year alone. and has made humanitarian work in many areas almost impossible.
33 civilians have been killed in an attack by suspected jihadists in western Burkina Faso. The attack was carried out by a heavily armed Islamist who rode into the village on motorbikes. The security situation in Burkina Faso has been gradually worsening for months, forcing thousands of Burkinabe to flee for safety, many of whom have headed to neighbouring Niger. Our correspondent in Niamey, Harold Gerard, went to meet some of them.
Terrorist groups are trying to enforce Sharia law in some parts of northern Burkina Faso. Just last December, over 5,000 Burkinabe citizens fled to Niger.
If the jihadists catch you listening to the radio, even if it's just music, they'll beat you if it's not an Islamic sermon. Sometimes, if they believe you're doing something against their version of Islam, they'll kill you.
For fear of being caught by a terrorist group, this man decided not to register as a refugee.
On the day we arrived in Niger, the driver was warned not to hang around in the area. And we even crossed paths with the jihadists on Niger's side of the border.
Back in February, a refugee camp for Malians was attacked in the Tahoua region, leaving a deep impression on the community. The threat is becoming more pressing as jihadist groups tighten their grip on the border regions of Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. The UN Refugee Agency wants to reassure everyone.
We have what we call protection monitoring in these areas. We're able to gather information through partners on the ground so that these places are secure and that we can provide humanitarian aid.
But it's a tough challenge to predict terrorist attacks across borders. The G5 Sahel initiative remains stagnant, and Sahelian governments may have conflicting opinions and strategies.
We need to work together with neighbouring countries, because we can't contain terrorism by ourselves. We need to move beyond political aspects, and we need to cooperate genuinely. This is the only way forward for the region.
In Niger, the number of Burkinabe refugees may soon reach 30,000. Meanwhile, thousands of Malians continue to flee in the same direction.
Well, tomorrow we'll be bringing you some highlights from the Cannes Film Festival. 2 African films are in the running for the Palme d'Or top prize. Tunisian film Les Filles d'Olfa and Senegalese offering Benal El Adema. We'll have more on both films tomorrow, but for now, we'll leave you with a short sample of what's to come. Thanks for watching Eye in Africa and stay tuned to France 24.
Adama? Darana?
Midi wadde sahaji ko sahabbal wonno e sahaji enen non
Allah woni koye hollude en bela garten e laawol puccugol
surtout tan badal a adam e wujitani ɗum de.
From North America to the southern tip of Patagonia, join us for a look at the latest political, economic, cultural and social news from the Americas.
Inside the Americas, presented by Jeannie Godula on France 24 and France24.com. France 24, every art form.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.